Season 5, Episode 13, The Masterpiece Society. The Enterprise spots a stellar core fragment about to body slam Moab 4, home to a genetically engineered perfect society that's basically allergic to change. Their leader, Aaron Connor, is like, no thanks, we're good. But when it becomes clear that evacuation isn't optional, he lets the crew beam down begrudgingly. The crisis is averted, but the colonists get a taste of something outside of their bubble, and suddenly that perfect life doesn't look so flawless. 22 colonists request asylum, and as they all fly away on the Enterprise, Picard wonders if helping out the colony really just ended up destroying it anyway. Hello and welcome to the Savage Stream, the weekly live stream all about Star Trek. Today we are talking about some of the big kind of ethical and societal questions that come up from the episode The Masterpiece Society. Now, there are 5 things that I want to talk about, kind of 5 keystones that I noticed while watching this episode. And if you're watching on the replay, the timestamps are below so you can jump ahead at any time. I want to start by saying this episode's not great. It's definitely not. Like, there are some episodes that I geek out over, that I gush all over. Starship Mine, I'm looking at you. But I do think there are a lot of issues that are brought up through this conversation, through this episode specifically, that I think are worth talking about. And the first thing that I want to talk about is genetic engineering. Oh, yay, PS2 Chipper gifted a membership. So if you have not joined the away team, there's 1 membership available to snap up. Okay, so genetic engineering doesn't technically happen in this episode. It's actually selective breeding, which is just like the slow version of genetic engineering. So if you think about anything that's been domesticated, like cats or cows, or any crops, any agricultural crops that have been domesticated, like corn, all those things came about through selective breeding. So dogs, for example, were domesticated from wolves. And so you just kind of pick wolves that are kind of nice, that try not to bite people as much, and then you breed them with other nice wolves, and then you keep going until you get dogs, right? So what they did here was, instead of the traditional model of genetic engineering or selective breeding, which is trying to create an environment that's more hospitable to humanity, trying to create crops that have a bigger yield, or are more tasty or easier to grow, or trying to create animals, livestock that are easier to handle, easier to control, what have you. Instead, in this scenario, they are creating people that get along with each other better, and presumably also the environment. So the backstory behind the Masterpiece Society is that there were these separatists who lived on Earth 200 years ago who were like, we don't really super love this. We think we can do better. So they took a whole ship full of people and they flew to Moab 4, some random planet somewhere, and they created their own little biodome. And they said, we are going to make the perfect society where every person knows their role, every person knows their purpose, and every person is genetically selected in such a way that their actual DNA supports them in the role that they play in this society. So I think that's a really interesting idea, because not only are they engineering the environment like we literally do all the time here on Earth, but they're actually engineering the people in the environment as well. So it's very much like a ship in a bottle, right? They can create all the circumstances. And who's to say which creations are good ones or not? I guess they are. But so in the TNG podcast, my co-host and I referred to this episode as Gattaca in space. Although it's not really a good comparison, because Gattaca is awesome. Like, I love that movie. I think it's so good for a lot of these same reasons. A lot of these same conversations really come out of that. And this episode, I don't feel like it's nearly as strong as Gattaca. But the thing about this episode that I think is kind of similar, there's a couple things, and we're going to talk about them. But one of the things in this whole idea of genetically engineering the perfect pieces is that means these people don't really have choice, right? Like, you were created to be our society's best gardener. You were created to be our society's best leader, or our society's best scientist, or whatever. And it seems like there's not a ton of redundancy in this system. So it's like they've got the one planetary leader and the one second in command who's been genetically, selectively bred to be just kind of like a naysayer on everything, right? His whole life is all about being like, Aaron, you shouldn't do this. Aaron, you shouldn't do that. And that's his life. And so you don't really have a lot of freedom, because your role has already been pre-selected, presumably 200 years ago, when the original colonists decided, we're going to make the perfect society, and these are the roles the society needs, and we will create every single role as a human being, and then we will train them and raise them to fit that role, and then they will live out that role until they have kids, and so on and so forth. I think on some levels, this makes sense logically. Like if we were making, I don't know, a video game, maybe, where you can control all the variables and create it exactly how you want it. But there's something about that too that feels really sterile and kind of unhuman, and probably more accurately is like un-American because we're all about like uniqueness and individuality and all of that. And so I think this idea of, a handful of people deciding this is what the perfect society looks like, and everyone being brought up to be in that society and having no choice, it's kind of a tough thing to swallow. But according to Aaron, who is the planetary leader, or really the colony's leader, he says that everyone's happy with this arrangement. Like he said, if I wasn't in this society, yes, I've been born to lead, but even if I wasn't, forced to lead, or this wasn't my role, I would still choose this because I love this and I'm made to do this. And so I think it's really interesting because you've got this side where people know their purpose and they don't have to be like, what am I meant to do in the world? How do I contribute to society? They're born knowing exactly what it is. Like, this is your purpose. This is how you contribute, right? So I think that's kind of nice. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, man, you're born and people are like, this is your purpose. And you're like, okay, but what if, so I can't explore things. I can't try different things. I can't see what things I like. Also, there's kind of a blurry section between nature versus nurture, which we'll talk about. I think I have this in one of my bullet points of, just because they're genetically engineered to be a really awesome, I don't know, long distance runner or something like that, does that mean that doesn't mean they're genetically engineered to love running? You know what I mean? They have to be conditioned to love running. Someone has to be like, oh my gosh, running's so fun. Oh my gosh, you're going to love running. Let's run all the time. You know what I mean? Like there's another side to it. It's not just the genes. It's like they have to want to also do that thing. So they have to be told that that's what they want. I don't know. There's a lot of layers. So we're going to stop there. That's the first level. And then I've got a couple other things I want to mention, but I want to jump into the chat and say hello to everybody who's watching live. Hello to everybody who's watching on the replay. I'm going to jump into the chat, get some conversation going, and then we'll go to the second keystone that I noticed. Woohoo! We got another membership. Thank you so much. Okay. Going back. Oh, is Magnar here? Wait, did I miss Magnar? If you're here, hi friend, I haven't seen you in a long time. Wingrace says, #nice wolves. Exactly. We want the nice wolves, not the ones that want to eat us, which is kind of funny because like a pack of wolves is not gonna really do too much to a human unless they're super hungry and you're just very tasty and frail and like out in the middle of nowhere and can't defend yourself. That being said, I don't want to run into a wolf or a pack of wolves. Nadia says, it sounds a bit old school communist, which is probably where communism got that idea, right? Like that's probably why communism exists and socialism, right? It's this idea of like, we as the government can make everything equal and fair. And all we have to do is just control every aspect of everything about your lives and we can make it go well. But then the question is, how do you know that decision of perfection is accurate? Which I would argue is the same issue that I have with the Borg Queen, who I think is an awesome villain, but her whole idea of perfection is being Borg, right? And it's like, could perfection happen in any other way? I don't know, maybe not, because maybe the definition of perfection is that it can only be one thing and exactly one thing. Best of Trek, worst of Trek says, much bigger fan of Gattaca than this episode. I agree. Gattaca's so good. This episode's very meh. But the same conversations happen with both, I think. Nadia says, and this is beyond genetic evolution. Sure, they try to breed certain traits to make people good at what they are assigned to, but they are still requiring people to play certain roles. Yes, they are requiring people to play certain roles, and there's no say in it. There's no choice in it. It's just like, these are the roles we need, and these are the kids we're going to birth to fill those roles. The end. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, okay, it's limiting to us who've grown up in a world and a culture, for those of us who have this culture, where we have more choice. So I think that's also an interesting point, is that if you're a person who is used to being like, what do you want to be when you grow up, and you have choice, the thought of not having choice sounds really stifling and kind of terrifying, honestly, to me. However, if I was a person who grew up not knowing that choice was a thing, maybe it wouldn't sound so bad. I don't know. It's really hard to put myself in their shoes, but they've been doing this for 200 years. So by human standards, they're only at the third generation of people on this colony. So the people who originally moved there knew exactly everything about choice. They came from Earth. They knew everything about choice and free will and people having options. They knew all that stuff. And they decided, here's what perfection looks like. Here are the roles we need to fill, and here's who will fill them. So they, of anyone, should, could, might have had that kind of conflict. But presumably, the generations beyond them just grew up being like, oh, yeah, this is just what it's like. Yeah, you're just told exactly what you're supposed to do when you're born. It's not a big deal. So I don't know. Nadia says, what happens if you're not good at what you're bred to do? Right? What happens if you're not good? They don't say, because apparently everyone's really good at it. When Grace suggests maybe they melt you down and try again, which is gross. When Grace says, similar to the one Wayun in Deep Space Nine, who didn't follow his genetics. Nadia says, I forgot about that, but yes. Oh, I see. How do you know that they're here but not in the chat? How do you know that? Because I don't know that. Okay, Nadia says, if you have never seen it, watch that Cuban movie called Guantanamera. It's such a good look at people who were trained in one area pre-revolution, but who were then assigned other jobs. Awesome film. I have never, the pre-Cuban revolution. Okay. Yeah, I have never heard of that movie before. I think that's got to be like such a tricky thing when, I think it's got to be such a tricky thing when you're in the transition, when you were trained one way and now you're in another situation, right? But like Aaron and company, because we didn't see any grandparents, Aaron et al. Have grown up in this world. So it's not weird to them. There's nothing about it that's wrong. And they've also grown up knowing we don't mix with outsiders. So when the Enterprise comes and they're like, hey, we want to save your planet from destruction. They're like, no, we don't need your help. We're good. We don't really, we're good, you know? And it's kind of like, they don't even know what they're missing, which I guess is the point. I don't know. We're going to talk about it more. Nadia says, are you saying that the Masterpiece Society are the perfect version of the Borg? Honestly, if I had a choice between the two, I would definitely pick Masterpiece Society over Borg, because they do have individuality. They do have diversity. It's just pre-selected individuality. It's pre-selected diversity. It's like they didn't choose that they're going to be a piano prodigy or whatever. Like they didn't choose that, but they have piano prodigies, which I feel like the Borg just don't have. PS2 Chipper says, this reminds me of the book Brave New World, a book which I have not read. Oh, okay. That's how you know it shows everyone available. Oh, who knew? Nadia says, I took a lot of Latin American study classes in college. Yeah, I took a lot of cool classes in college too. Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. Yeah, I got to remember that. I got to remember the name of that movie. Maybe email me if you get a chance, Nadia, so I don't forget to watch that, to look that up. When Grace says, also a bit like the Deep Space Nine episode where they try to make the Bajorans go back to a caste system. And then when Grace said, did I miss it? Hold on. And then Nadia says, yes, I just rewatched that a couple weeks ago. It's a really good episode, returning to their Dajara, or whatever they call it. Best of Trek, Worst of Trek says, how many more unknown human colonies are out there? Over, under 1,000. Oh, thanks, Nadia, for emailing that. Honestly, these people who they just discovered, they only discovered there was a colony here because there's this huge stellar core fragment hurtling towards the Moab 4. It's not going to crash into Moab 4, but it's going to come close enough to cause so many earthquakes that it will destroy every single structure in their whole entire colony, break their biodome, and kill everyone. So that's why the Enterprise is going to, like, first they were just tracking it to see its effect on the planets, but then they discovered that there was a colony there, and they're like, oh shoot, we should warn them and try to help them or whatever. So had this stellar core fragment not made its way, we would have never known that a colony was there. It kind of reminds me of Khan, right? And the whole thing of like, oh, all these ships, we lost World War III or whatever, so all these ships were deployed, and we're the ones who made it, whatever the whole thing Khan was saying. About like we don't know how many other human colonies are out there creating their version of perfection on random moons and random planets. And according to this, they don't even have to be M class, right? Because with Moab 4, they just created a biodome where they like pumped in atmosphere and brought in the plants and whatever. So they have the technology where they can colonize any kind of planet. It doesn't have to be like a planet that was previously inhabited by humanoids of any kind. So yeah, I'm going to say over under 1,000. I'm going to say probably over. Whoever had a ship capable and like enough people that they could take. But the real question is how many of them survived, right? Because this colony is going strong after 200 years. How many of the others made it? I don't know. Don't know. Wingrace says, too bad this colony didn't have racist Irish neighbors. Oh my gosh, I know. Stereotypical, I guess, is better. Yeah, what was the name of that episode with the Mariposans? It was called Up the Long Ladder. Awful. Yeah, that was another, you're right. That was another colony, but what was different in that one is like it was a ship that like didn't it crash or something that they were doing, and then they like had a big split because one were like we need to be all genetically awesome, and the other ones were like we should just be regular people, and then the regulars went down to the planet and the genetically enhanced people stayed on the ship, and then they like evolved all differently. Yeah, these colonists, I don't know. DJ Magic says probably over 1,000. These are random colonies. Progenitors reached the Delta Quadrant, so I think way more than 1,000, i.e. Chakotay finding his people all the way in the Delta Quadrant. That is an interesting thought. Nadia says, yes, the Brinloidy. Oh, yeah, what were they called? I don't know. Or whatever, however you write it. They were awesome. I can hear that lady say father. She was so annoying. Bezertrek Worsertrek says, just talking about the ones from Earth originally. So many episodes revolve around finding lost human colonies. And Bezertrek Worsertrek did do like a 12-hour countdown of all 800 and something episodes of Star Trek that have ever been made. So when he says there are so many episodes, like he has cataloged all the episodes that literally go over that, which is wild. Oh, there we go. Distant Origin and Voyager with the dinosaurs. I like that one. When Grace says approximately 1,701 colonies. I'm surprised you didn't throw a 47 in there somehow. Nice. Okay, so let's talk about the second pillar that I noticed when I was watching this episode or thinking about this episode or thinking about the much better movie Gattaca. Which imperfections should be fixed? This is a big question because we even have the technology now to see different things that are going wrong in utero. We know that now. And we absolutely have the technology for genetic engineering. If we wanted to pull a Gattaca, we could. If we wanted to genetically engineer the perfect little embryo, we could absolutely do that and then implant it into a woman. You'd probably need to implant quite a few because there's no guarantee that that one embryo will survive to term, to like be birthed. But we do currently have the technology to do all of this stuff, which is wild. And there's all kinds of regulations because of all the ethics around it. That being said, which imperfections should be fixed? Now, in the society, in the Masterpiece Society, everyone's got their perfect roles to play. Everyone's genetically engineered or selectively bred, I should say, for their roles. And apparently they're all super happy about it. They don't have any kind of illness or disease in their colony. And so when the head scientist, I forget her name, maybe it's Hannah or something, is talking to Geordi, she's like, oh, what's that about? Like, you're blind. We don't do that in our colony. You should fix that, or we would fix that. Or maybe just like, which I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if they would eliminate blindness from the genetic code of the embryo or if they would terminate the embryo. I'm guessing the first one where they would just like change the DNA where your eyes work, right? And she was like, yeah, you're broken because you're blind and we don't have that in our society. And doesn't that suck for you? And he was just like, well, I never thought of it like that because I don't really feel broken and my visor is awesome. And let me be clear, Geordi's visor is like 1,000 times better than regular eyes, right? It's like so much better. It's amazing. He can see infrared. He can see like energy waves. He can see warp core, like particles and all this cool stuff. However, to her point, if he takes the visor off, now he can't see anything. right? He is kind of dependent on technology. Similar to, I have a really good friend who has to use crutches because of childhood illness. And so it'd be the equivalent of being like, we're just going to make you like a new spine and new legs, right? So you don't have to use crutches, because crutches are like his visor, right? Like it'd be better and easier if you just didn't have to use some external piece of technology at all. And while I do agree, it will be easier in the world, right? Like it's easier in the world for Geordi if he didn't have to depend on his visor. That being said, the visor is so cool, and it would have never been invented without Geordi, right? Or like other people like Geordi. Such a technology would not have been created, just like crutches would not have been created without a need for them. And to my friend's credit, while she was young, she kind of saw it as like a hard thing, like, oh man, I'm the only one with crutches or whatever. But as she's gotten older and kind of grown into who she is as a woman, she's like, you know what? These actually have given me my freedom. Like they've given me the ability to go all kinds of places that I couldn't go if I had to be on my hands and knees, right? Like, so she's like so appreciative of the abilities that her crutches gives her. And Geordi, of course, loves his visor. And one of the things I love about Geordi and the way they wrote this character is they were very intentional about the fact that they were never going to call to Geordi's blindness as some kind of disability, as something wrong with him. They were just like, oh yeah, he's blind. He uses a visor. Anyways, like they were very intentional about that choice. And I think it's so powerful because like I could feel it as a kid. I never thought anything, because they didn't make a big deal of it. I didn't make a big deal of it because it was just like a cool visor to them. It was a cool visor to me. You know what I mean? And so this conversation is really interesting because I think, to my knowledge, and maybe best of Trek, worst of Trek, you'd know better, but to my knowledge, this is the only time they had a conversation really about Geordi's eyesight. That like just directly being like, don't you feel bad that you're blind or something like that. I don't remember that happening before or after this episode. And so all that to be said, while I think it's very attractive that you can eliminate a lot of genetic diseases and stuff like that in embryo in this society, like people can be born with straight spines or, the right number of chromosomes and things like that, then there's a level to where you're just like really picking and choosing every single little thing, just like Gattaca, right? Like the color of their eyes and the color of their hair and how tall they're going to be, and just like a bunch of things that don't have to do with their health and well-being. But I think Hannah, if that's her name, would probably argue that blindness is something that needs to be like selected out. It's something that needs to be, fixed immediately so they can function better in their whole perfect society. And so then that's where the question of diversity or lack thereof comes in. Because if you're not allowing natural things to happen, then you're not going to have the creative skills to address those issues, right? Like you're not going to need that level of ingenuity because it's not being applied to something that needs a solution now. And it also kind of makes me wonder about the society as a whole. What was the point? Like, what was the point of this? I know the people originally flew out to this moon or flew out to create this colony on this planet because they wanted something perfect. But for what purpose? What are these people in this little bubble supposed to do? Are they just supposed to live in this bubble forever and ever and just be happy about their bubble? Like, I don't know. Because part of me is like, shouldn't they contribute to the larger galaxy or to, I don't know, if there's a bigger world that they could help, should they do that? And where do we see this going? Is the idea that this is going to become like the new center of the foundation or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, is this going to be new Earth someday because it's like so great and old Earth just fell apart because people were too diverse and different? And you know what I mean? Like, what's the point of this colony? I don't know. And we don't get that answer. But here's my question to you in the comments. What would you change genetically if you could? Like, what things would you change? No wrong answers, no judgment, just curious of your thoughts. Like I said before, the like debilitating diseases and illnesses would totally change. If there was some way to prevent cancer from ever existing, I'm on board with that. If there was some way to prevent Alzheimer's from ever developing, I'm on board with that. Things that I feel like just rob people's spirit and their minds and their lives, like I'm on board with that. But then the question of stuff like blindness, if that was my child and I could control it, I'd probably be like, oh yeah, just, yeah, change that. You know what I mean? But then I'm looking at Geordi and I'm like, oh man, he's such a rich character and this is part of who he is. And then you take that away from him. I don't know. It's like a hard decision, which is why I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. So I'm just curious, what kinds of things would you change? Or would you change nothing? Would you just be like, it is what it is, roll the dice, society's meant to be messy? Let me know in the chat and in the comments. I'm going to check the comments real quick, and then we'll go to the next pillar. Okay. Let's see. Nadia says, I flipping love Distant Origin. Is one of my frequent Voyager watches. You know what? So you were saying so you guys were talking about how many other colonies of humans there are and how often it's used as a plot. But this too is in this episode, the doctor is like re-engaged or whatever. And he's telling the true, isn't he re-engaged in this one? Or am I making that up? Am I confusing it with that other episode? I'm going to wait on that one because I know he's re-engaged for that episode where it's like the warship Voyager, and he has to set the whole record straight and then he like heads back to Earth. I don't remember if he's re-engaged on this one though. I feel like he is. And if so, how many versions of the Doctor do we have heading back to Earth? That'd be my other question. But yeah, Distant Origin is a really good one. And I love that they're like reptilian. I love that they're dinosaurs and that's like the evolved version of humanity because it plays on the stupid salamander babies in a much more interesting way. And I like the idea that we've gone from like dinosaurs to like mammals and humans and then like to dinosaurs. I don't know. Something about that is just really fun. PS2 Chipper says, women do like tall men. I don't know if that's all women, but I like tall men. Best of Trek, worst of Trek says, Catholic dinosaur is one of my favorite also. Yeah, the dinosaur episode's so good. And the makeup on that episode, oof, perfection. Nadia says, what should be fixed? My first thought was selfishness, but then I heard Gordon Gekko, greed is good. Yeah, see, okay, so there's two things, Nadia, to that. There's what things can we change genetically, so those are going to impact our like physical characteristics, and then what things could we change that affect our personality. And sure, there's interplay because everything's connected, but personality is definitely like part of it is the culture that you're brought up in and stuff. And so I do kind of wonder about this culture because they're so isolated and they're like, we don't want to mix with the outsiders because it's going to ruin our flow. I wonder if they don't seem xenophobic though. Like, so I kind of wonder what these people are like. They don't seem like they hate outsiders. And when they beam when the away team beams to the colony to like help shore up their systems or whatever, Aaron is like delighted. Like he's got this look on his face where he's like, oh, look at this technology. They're transporting. He basically does the same excited face that I do every time they transport on Star Trek. And then his number two, whose name I forget, I think it's Martin. He's like, no, this is bad. We don't like this. Technology, outsiders, bad, bad, bad. But Aaron's like, this is so cool. So they don't seem super xenophobic. And even the second in command doesn't seem super xenophobic. It's just his role to really protect the traditions in the old way. And I think that literally is his role. His role is to like interpret the ideology of the founders or something like that. So it's not that he doesn't like outsiders. It's just that he's trying to like maintain what they had. But I do like that idea of cutting out selfishness. Nadia also says, I actually didn't see them as Catholic in particular, more so as representative of fixed mindsets from any faith belief system, or as they say, doctrine. I completely agree with you, Nadia. I completely agree. I think that that's what they represent, any faith-based doctrine that is not only do they want to keep things status quo, but also the reason why they feel threatened is because they are in power. And if they start questioning their origins, then that will lessen their power over the people. So I think it also comes back to kind of like your first point of like eliminating selfishness. It comes back to that. Nadia says, wow, Charisse, the subject matter is full cerebral tonight. You shouldn't have gotten me started. Yes, I'm doing a new thing. I'm trying a new style of these live streams to make them a little more podcasty. So let me know in the comments if you're feeling this new style, or if you're not, if you're like, no, go back to the top 10 list. Because I did like that, but I can't keep that style up. Like that was exhausting. It was killing me putting those together. DJ Magic says, CRISPR gene editing, I think it would work for a few generations, but then slowly fail. All sorts of genetic failure due to breeding too many of the same genes. Need a mutation here and there to survive. Which I agree. Like genetic diversity is extremely important, which is why getting cloned crops is so dangerous. So when every single thing is the same, like for example, corn is a crop that is cloned quite often. But if you have whole fields full of the same exact genetically identical corn without any kind of genetic diversity, no little mutations, not mutations that turn the corn like totally inedible, but just slight variations, if some kind of pathogen or disease causing thing comes along, it'll wipe out everything because they're all the same. They don't have any differences in their abilities to fight off some kind of disease or infection or whatever. And that's why genetic diversity in general is very, very important, because you never know what's going to survive. So if we think back to, if you guys remember like your high school biology or whatever, and the whole idea of survival of the fittest, which is kind of an outdated idea, but just go with me here. If we look on different islands, we'll find different kinds of finch, which is a type of bird. We'll find ones with like big beaks and small beaks and big size and small size and red color and yellow color and whatever fits for their environment. Now, originally, some of these finch were all on the same landmass, but then the land broke up and they evolved differently, right? To suit their new environments. Maybe it's really hot, so they evolved for that. Or maybe the seeds are really big, so they have really big beaks, or the seeds are really small, so they have really small beaks, right? They're evolving to fit their society, their environment. But it's not like they all broke off of the big landmass and immediately had small beaks, right? They broke off the landmass and had whatever beaks they had, but there were slight little variations. And then over time, the birds that were better adapted to that society became more and more and more, and the ones that were not well adapted died off. But there's still genetic diversity. So that way, if there's another shift, that'll happen again. And if there's another shift, that'll happen again. So in this example, in the Masterpiece Society, I guess they're assuming there won't be any of those shifts because they're carefully controlling the environment. So there's no danger of like, oh, suddenly we're on an island, or suddenly we're on a mountain, or there was a volcanic eruption and now we're on the dark side, or you know what I mean? Like there is none of that environmental instability that could affect their genetic diversity because they're carefully controlling everything. Their environment is completely controlled. But here's my challenge. Why don't they have redundancy? Like, why don't they have more than one leader? Like, why is it just Aaron? Because sure, he's not going to be taken out by like heart disease or stroke, but what if he fell down the stairs? Who's the leader now? So that was my one thought about this Masterpiece Society, is I just thought any system has redundancy. So you should have more than one leader in training just in case. But that's neither here nor there. Nadia says, as a multicultural person, I concur. I love the mutts. Yeah. So I took mutt to be mutant more than like, what are you mixed with and what's going on with you? Because you can look exactly like everyone else, but still have slight variations in your DNA. I mean, twins can have slight variations in their DNA. That's what keeps us alive, you know? That's why one twin can be allergic to something and the other twin not. We all have like these slight variations, which is good. Windgrace says there was the episode where Geordi was stuck in the pit with a Romulan who said they'd have killed him on Romulus. Oh, yes. Yes. What was that episode? Enemy? The Enemy? That episode was The Enemy, I think. That is true. And that guy was such a jerk. Okay, and then Best of Trek, Worst of Trek says Data has a conversation during Measure of a Man or The Offspring, I think, with Picard about why all humans are not required to get a visor with implants. Ooh, that's good. I don't remember that conversation. I trust you. I don't remember that conversation, so I can't pull think of the episode it was in. But he makes a good point. And my whole question with Data is like, why are you trying to be human? Like, you have so many benefits over humanity. Like, you are downgrading, but that's neither here nor there. Nadia said, I would fix sociopathy and psychopathy. No more serial killers, please. And neurodegenerative diseases or any lethal childhood diseases. Yeah, I like where your head's at, Nadia. I would vote you the leader of the colony for sure. Windgrace says, I love the Voth TV show, Doctor Who. We're like on a Doctor Who kick today. DJ Magix says, no designer babies, but all genetic deformities like bone, muscle, and such are optional, but up to parents. That was the other thing too, DJ Magix, I was thinking about, is like, who decides, right? Because in the Masterpiece Society, the people who flew away from Earth 200 years ago decided what perfection means, what the roles are, who they shall be. And then I guess everyone was like on board with this, and they had kids and they trained the kids to like be on board with this. And what I like about that is that nothing's under the table. Nothing's like a secret. Like they all know they are genetically selectively bred. They all know they're part of this harmony in their society. So nothing's like a secret. But I do wonder kind of like who gets the final say and who's to say that was the right choice. So those people decided what perfection is and everyone else went along with it. But now even with that of like, well, the parents should decide what their kids do or don't have. Do you remember that episode in Voyager where B'Elanna gets a chance to see her baby, like the holographic version of what her baby's going to look like, because the doctor notices some kind of genetic something going on with the baby while she's pregnant. And he tells her, like, okay, I need to get in there and like change this one thing because it could hurt the baby. And then like baby will be fine. So at first, Tom and B'Elanna are like, oh no, like what's wrong with the baby? But as soon as the doctor's like, oh, do you want to see her? And shows what the baby looks like, B'Elanna freaks out because the baby looks Klingon. And she's like, why does the baby look Klingon? The baby's only 25% Klingon. Why does the baby have like freaking forehead ridges? What is going on? And he was like, oh yeah, I mean, he's got a mix of both of your DNA, and like Klingon genes are super strong and whatever. And B'Elanna just loses her mind, right? In this whole episode, she ends up wanting to delete whole chunks of the baby's DNA to eliminate every trace of being Klingon from her. You know, she's arguing with the doctor saying, why does she have 2 lungs? She doesn't need 2 lungs. And the doctor's like, well, Klingons believe they need large lung capacity so that they can win in battles. They can be, you know, amazing warriors. And she's like, my daughter's not going to be a Klingon warrior. And the doctor's like, with all due respect, you don't know what she's going to be. Like, you can't decide what her whole future is going to be right now. And she's like, bet I can. And totally like rewires the doctor to do this procedure. And I think Tom saves her at the last second and is like, please don't hurt our baby. And then it's all fine. And they make the doctor the godfather of the baby, which is super cute. But do you remember that episode, right? Like, and think about that. Like, yes, it was kind of wild how she went on this whole tangent about, I have to get rid of everything about my baby. But if you have the ability to fix or to change things about your baby so that you can give them the best life possible, whatever that means for you, I think that'd be extremely tempting. So I think that's a really good point in DJ Magic's about like up to the parents versus up to society versus up to the child, which obviously a baby can't make any decisions. But you know what I mean? Like, and that's another question I kind of have later on about what will we do now that we're adults? PS2 Chipper says, just ask bananas and oranges. They're getting hit hard by diseases. Yeah, poor bananas and oranges and bumblebees. Windgrace says, that was the downfall of the Asgard in Stargate. They cloned themselves to the point of losing sexual reproduction and then finally hit a wall and were unable to continue. Isn't that what happened in Aeon Flux too? Like, isn't that exactly what happened in Aeon Flux? Is that they just like cloned themselves to the point of just like, they just could not reproduce at all. I guess we're assuming they will somehow not do that. I don't know. I'm guessing there has some way to get around that inside of this colony. I mean, it's only been 200 years. So it's only been like 3 human generations. And apparently in the other scenarios, like an Aeon Flux or whatever, hadn't that been going on for like 1,000 years or 2,000 years or some crazy amount of time? DJ Magic says exactly what I was referring to, or in real life bulldogs and their breathing issues. Oh, poor bulldogs. Nadia says, or in real life, wasn't the English royal family that had several generations of hemophilia because of intermarriage? Or what about the pharaohs? They married siblings to keep the line pure. Yes, there was a lot of hemophilia in the English royal family. And that's also because of, especially when it comes to royalty, and like royalty can only marry royalty, right? So how many like kings and queens and princes and princesses and dukes and whatever are there? There was a limited pool. There's always been a limited pool. So you're going to, your DNA is just going to get too similar at some point. And that is a problem. Nadia says, I think Charisse just called me a mutant and I'm loving every minute of it. I am not calling you a mutant. I am calling you a beautiful collection of DNA, a unique variant, just like all of us. And I love it. Like, we as humans are all variants. It's hard. It's not even, okay. So I said the word mutant before when I was talking about like crops of plants. But if you think about it for humanity, and really for anything, but if you think about it for humanity, there is no one standard. Like, it only makes sense. The whole idea of mutant only makes sense in the face of clones. So if you have clones, everything is exactly the same. And if one thing is not the same, then it's the mutant. But that's not the case with humanity. And that's not the case with wild plants and wild animals, because they're not all coming from the same like parent progenitor creature. So they're just like regular. They're just normal. Like in science, we call them wild type. They're just wild type. They're not necessarily mutants because they're not clones. Nadia says, and now I'm the colony leader to boot. Bow down before me. Best of Trek, worst of Trek says it was in Measure of a Man. Look at you looking at the transcripts. PS2 Chipper says, I think every guy's name would be Tripod. Every guy's nickname would be Tripod. Why? Hey, Mr. Captain, good to see you. Mr. Captain says, very heavy conversation about genetics tonight. Yes, we were talking about the episode, The Masterpiece Society, which is not a great episode, but super interesting conversation. AF Kaplan says, that reminds me of what Dr. Bashir's parents did when they illegally had his DNA enhanced to increase his IQ. Exactly. And then AF Kaplan also says, it was the Romanov royal family as well. Crown Prince Alexei had hemophilia. Wingray says, fun fact, X-Men toys were able to avoid extra tariffs because they were classed as mutants and not human toys. You're so ridiculous. AKA Dustin Rocks. I hope you saw that Best of Trek, Worst of Trek. You got a shout out here in the chat. Okay, now let's talk about the next keystone that I thought about in watching The Masterpiece Society. And it was the idea of cultural isolation versus contamination. So a big reason why this colony did not want to mix with outsiders is because not only do they want to keep their genetic lines pure, whatever that means, because these people were also not clones. They were selectively bred. So they were not clones. They were not clones. They were not mutants. They had a lot of genetic, not a lot, not compared to the Earth, but they had genetic diversity in their colonies, and they made it that way on purpose. That's why I was like, I don't know how long it would take them to get to some aeon flux situation, because they're not cloning themselves, and they're not like the Mariposans in Up the Long Ladder, where they're just like, nuts about, we only have 5 people in our whole society and we just keep remaking them. They're not like that. So they do have diversity, and they just are selectively breeding to pick certain traits, right? But anyways, one of the reasons why they don't want interference is because they don't want to mess that up. They don't want other DNA coming into their carefully crafted and curated pool. In addition, Martin, or the second in command, is kind of like, we also don't want their weirdo beliefs rubbing off on us, right? Because they have a very specific worldview about how things should be, about what their values are, about, what is right, what is wrong, about purpose, about place, about all these things, about what society means, about what family means. They have their own values and value system. And the idea is like, if these any other people come in here with their nonsense, they might mess that up. No, we're not talking about Space Seed, although that would be a really good episode to talk about. Oh, well, that's a missed opportunity. That would have been a better episode to talk about than what we are talking about. We're talking about the Masterpiece Society, which is a TNG episode. My curiosity about this, right, is like, oh, we can't let the away team come down here. Now they know that there's not going to be any interbreeding while the away team is down there. I think we're there for like a week or something, maybe at most. They just came to shore up some systems, to avert the crisis, to push the asteroid away so it wouldn't mess up the planet, and then they left. That's it, right? So it wasn't like they needed to worry about all their DNA pools being contaminated by all these other humans or something like that. But they did have to worry about the cultural contamination. What if their belief systems affect us, or their values affect us, or whatever? But then it made me wonder a couple things. One, that nature versus nurture conversation we had a minute ago, which is, yes, they were selectively bred for these roles, but they've also been culturally, societally conditioned to like love these roles, to be like, yeah, you were made to be a pianist, you were made to be a math teacher, you were made to be a botanist, whatever, like you should love that, and let me help you love that thing more. So they were really trained into these roles, even more so than just being naturally gifted at these roles, right? They were trained, they were conditioned. So it was nature and nurture that made everybody fit together. And they have this very strong belief that even if one person from their society is gone for like one single second, it'll all turn into chaos. And the reason I know that is because there's this one scene where the scientist on the colony, I think her name's Hannah, like I said, I don't quite remember, but that's what I think it is. She wants to beam up to the Enterprise so that they can do something. Like they have to do some stuff in the lab or whatever. Maybe there's better technology on the ship. I don't know. But she wants to leave. And Martin is like, no, absolutely not. Cannot happen. And Aaron's like, this is for the safety of the whole colony. Like, this is for our survival. She's only going to be gone for like an hour. And Martin's like, if anyone leaves for any second, it's going to throw off our harmony. It's going to throw off the balance and all this stuff. And then he's like, and we don't know what the transporters might do to her genes, to her actual DNA. It might mess them up, and that will contaminate the gene pool. And Jordy's like, it's fine. We do this every day. There's nothing wrong with the transporters, which isn't totally true because a lot of stuff could go wrong with transporters. But for this example, he's like, there's nothing that could go wrong with transporters. It's so super safe. It's totally fine. Just beam her up. And they couldn't do a shuttle because, again, they live in a biodome. So you have to actually like beam in and out of this little bubble. So Martin's like, no, this is against the founder's wishes. They don't want anyone to leave. And then Aaron's like, okay, well, if we stay, we die. So let's just send her so that we can figure this out and so we can live, right? So that is another question I kind of have about with this culture is like, is exposure that dangerous? Is it? Because I'm thinking for the people who are in the transition phase, like we talked about before, I think that this could be really tempting, right? Like if you came here thinking we're going to make this perfect society, but you're from a society that has a lot of choice and options, and now you're in the society where you're playing one role and nothing else, and you can have no other choice, and you're indoctrinating the youth to thinking that whatever role is pre-selected for them is so awesome, and you have to tell them, oh, it's so awesome. Don't even look at anything else because this is the thing you were made to do, and it's so awesome. Like part of you might feel a little bit like, ooh, I'm not giving them the same freedom or choices I had, but it's for the greater good, whatever. So I feel like this argument of having the Enterprise come and be like, hey, you can still leave with us. I think that might be pretty tempting. But for these people, for Aaron et al., who's been raised in this society of like, our little bubble's the best, I have a hard time believing that just seeing a starship is going to like so radically change their worldview where they're like, man, F this. I don't want to stay on this colony. I want to explore the galaxy. That to me does not ring true. Like it just doesn't make any sense. And I think the point of the episode was like more to relate to the audience. Like this is what we'd be thinking. We'd be seeing this culture and being like, oh no, this is so terrible. They're isolated in this bubble. They need to explore the galaxy. They need to be more like Starfleet. They need to be more like the Enterprise crew because that's the right way to be. Like, I think that was like the moral of the story or the big idea. But looking back on it now, I'm just like, yeah, I don't think this would work with that society. I think this society would be like, thanks so much for your help. Okay, bye. Lose our number. Take us off the map. You know what I mean? Like they would still want to stay in their bubble because this is the values that they've grown. Changing values is a huge thing. Changing opinions is easy. Changing values is like a deep core sense of what you believe to be right and wrong, what you believe to be good and bad. Like this is a deeper issue than just like, oh, some people from a starship came along and so I'm out. Later, hope you guys, have the best time. So I thought that was kind of like hard to believe, but that was what they were selling. So I want to ask you in the chat and in the comments, do you think that the Enterprise crew should have been really that disruptive to the colony's beliefs? Do you think that that's accurate? And obviously, you know where I stand. No. But I'd love to hear your opinion, especially if it's different than mine, because maybe there's something I hadn't thought about. Now, I did think about other times where interference has like totally changed the colony. And that's the whole point of Prime Directive, right? Is like if they're pre-warp, we don't want to mess with their development or whatever. We want to wait for them to get warp capability. And then we can be like, hey, aliens exist. You know what I mean? It's like space travel exists. We can tell them that when they're kind of at that level, but we don't want to interfere ahead of time. I get that. And then I also get times like in the movie First Contact when Zefram Cochrane does break the warp barrier and the Vulcans come and they're like, hey, what's up? We saw you guys have warp technology. You know what I mean? They're all like, oh my gosh, aliens exist. Okay, that is going to create a huge fundamental shift in ideology because you're like, we thought we were alone in the universe, but now we know that they're Vulcans. Oh, and now we know that there's more than Vulcans. There's all kinds of things. Like, yes, that I think will have a hugely disruptive effect on society as a whole. And in the case of First Contact, it was perfect, right? Because they were just getting out of World War III. They had a lot of issues, and this kind of brought the whole planet together and helped them birth the Federation somehow. So I think that's different. This situation, though, it's not like these are pre-warp humans. It's not like they just finished a world war. It's not like they don't know aliens exist. It's not like they don't know space travel exists. They are humans from Earth. They've just grown up in this little bubble. So I just wonder if this would have that same kind of effect. Yay, PS2 Chipper has donated yet another membership. So if you want to, which reminds me, while you're answering in the chat, your thoughts, and I also want to check, I want to check the chat for your comments before I go to the third pillar, the fourth pillar of, I think I figured out the whole thing about the emoticons. So for those of you who I talked to last week about using the emoticons, try it this way. Try the colon. So for the little Borg emoji, try colon, Borg, colon, and then see if that works. So hopefully that works. If not, I got some more research to do. But hopefully that works. Okay. Not the underscore, just the colon, Borg colon. Try that. Try that and see if that works. It's still not working. Darn it. Okay. Oh, wait, yes, it does work? Oh, I just can't see it. Okay. I'm like, all I'm seeing is Borg, and I'm like, why isn't it working? Okay. Back to the chat. Where did we leave off? We were talking about mutants. We were talking about Nadia is the leader of the colony. Exoteric sup nerds. You know, Will Wheaton starts like all his conversations like that on like social media and stuff, which I think is so funny. Hold on. X-Men toys. Aw. Best of Trek, worst of Trek says, Nadia, if I rock, then you roll, which I guess is what you could say instead of thank you. You could say, if I rock, you roll. I love that. Okay, Mr. Captain 93 says, so here's a question. Where did the genetics come from for Khan and his kin? Yeah, I don't totally remember Space Seed, like the explanation they gave, but I think they were genetically engineered. Like, I don't think there was any selective breeding in Space Seed. I think they literally just went to the lab and they were like, oh, shoot, I still have that up. Hold on. I think they just went into the lab and they were just like, here's what we want, here's what we don't want. We want them to be super strong and super all these things. That's what I think, but I don't totally remember. So one of you who remembers Space Seed better than me, let me know. Yes. When Grace says a moment of silence for Dustin's video. Yeah, Dustin had like, yeah, Dustin says too soon. Dustin had pulled like 70 clips for a video, which as a content creator, I know the pain of that. And then they just disappeared because of chronotons. So we don't know what's going to happen next with that. Nadia says, test tubes, petri dishes, whatevs, not selective breeding in the traditional sense. Mm-hmm. Oh, so sad. Okay, AF Kaplan says, it was not just about the DNA, but also about exposing their citizens to the possibilities of what lies outside of their society. Space travel to other planets, for example. Yes, and I don't think these people were unaware of space travel. Like, they were warp capable. I don't think they had any ships other than the ship that brought them. I don't think they had any shuttles. I don't think they were in the habit of traveling. Like, that's not their jam. But they were not a pre-warp society who'd never heard of space travel. Mr. Captain 93 says, when you think of it, they really like their genetic manipulation in Trek. Yes, they do. PS2 Chipper says someone needs to do the manual labor. Isn't that what the robots are for? Best of Trek, worst of Trek says, I love Ron Canada, but not so much in this role as Martin. I agree. They did need somebody to play that role. So, you know, if anyone's going to play it, let him play it. But yeah, the role itself was just super annoying. Mr. Captain 93 says, wasn't this also a 90s Pauly Shore movie, Biodome or something? Yes, there was a Pauly Shore movie called Biodome. And I remember watching it as a kid and thinking it was so hilarious. And I remember trying to watch it as an adult and I just couldn't get like more than 3 minutes into the movie. But as a kid in the 90s, it was hilarious because as a kid in the 90s, everything Pauly Shore did was hilarious. Yes, exactly. AF Kaplan says, it's a society as a closed system taken to the umpteenth degree. Exactly. Mr. Captain 93 says, similar to that colony on the radiation planet with the aqueducts. Yeah, so I think you're talking about that colony that the Shellyak came to recover. And I think that episode was called Instance of Command. For what reason? I don't know. But the whole episode was about Data trying to convince these humans to get off of the colony before they were destroyed by the Shellyak. There was also that planet that kidnapped Wesley and all the kids because they were also like all isolated. Yeah, they like it a lot, and it doesn't super help. Nadia, bye. Thanks for your help. Lose our number. Take us off the map. Better yet, rename this sector the Gulf of No. The Gulf of No One Lives Here. That's hilarious. I do wonder, though. I feel like it shouldn't have been that disruptive. And I also feel like the colony would be like, thanks so much for your help. Let's keep in touch just in case we need you again in the future. Like, that's kind of how I feel they would have gone about that. I don't know. Exoteric says, I was raised by strict religious parents. I was homeschooled and didn't have friends or exposure to anything different. I didn't know what I didn't know. Exactly. You didn't know what you didn't know. You just had your upbringing. The way things were the way things were. And that's how you are as a child. Now imagine if you were in that strict religious home with your parents, but like your whole entire community was like that. Your whole city was like that. Like the entire town, the entire state was like that. Like it wouldn't be weird, right? Nothing about that would be weird. And then if someone came along and they were different, you may be like, oh, how interesting, they're different. But how likely would you be to be like, oh, they're totally different, I'm just going to go with them now? I don't know how likely that is. Yes, PS2 Chipper gifted another membership. You can do the colon board colon if you're part of the membership. Exoteric says, I would have loved to be exposed to more real life much earlier in life. The Enterprise is doing them a favor, in my opinion. Perfectly executed, but important, imperfectly executed, but important. Naivete can be dangerous. And you know, there's also that thing about the age, because you were saying, Exoteric, you would have loved to know more about real life earlier, but that's because you were raised in this strict religious household, but not in a strict religious city and state. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like everybody in your world was exactly the same. So when you did get exposed, then you're like, oh my gosh, the world's bigger than I thought. And then the world's different. And then people have different, and then it just becomes this big, like, well, how much do I know? Right? Whereas again, I feel like with these people, they're aware that other people exist. They just want nothing to do with them. And they've been raised that way this whole time. And everybody agrees they're all on the same page with that. Bester Trek, Worser Trek says, I mean, if she didn't go, they may have to evacuate the colony forever. So it's only a negative for her not to go. Why would they have to evacuate the colony forever? Did I miss something? Yes, Borg. Yes, let's go. You can also do Vulcan and Orion and something else. What was the other one? Vulcan, Orion, oh my gosh, it's gonna come to me. Okay, so Wingrace says, I suppose the effect is similar to when Voyager met that big, long generation ship and Harry got STD and broke them all up. Yeah, like to Wingrace's point of that it's a common trope to have human colonies just out and about in the galaxy, just out and about, you know, doing their thing. It's also a common trope to come across xenophobic life forms who either love the interference of the Federation or hate the interference of the Federation. This also, like we just mentioned, the Shellyak, they consider humanity to be like bugs or something. So they were just going to eradicate the whole colony if Data didn't get them out of there. Yeah, and DJ Magix, yeah, it's not working because those emoji are only for people who are in the away team membership, who are in the channel membership. So if Borg does not show up for you, which is totally cool, just pick another emoji. Pick like whatever you want. Pick the Vulcan hands, pick the what was I gonna say? Pick the laughing one. That's my favorite one. The rolling over laughing. That's my favorite one. So yeah, if Borg's not working for you, just pick another one that you love and drop it in the comments, which will also make me happy. Borg. That's funny. It assimilates. That's funny. Adam Sung created Khan, and he was brought up in an institute in Toronto. Oh yeah, did we get this background information in Picard season 2 about where Khan came from? Because it wasn't like the very end of the season, he like closed a folder, or there was something on his computer or something that was like Operation Khan or something. I don't know. You would know better than me, Dustin, because like I don't totally remember what all happened in Picard season 2. Okay, a few more comments, and then we're going to go to the next keystone that I saw from watching the episode The Masterpiece Society. A.F. Kaplan says they were genetically engineered. That's true. And the experiment ran amok, and that kicked off the eugenics war. Talking again about Khan, which, man, this is such a missed opportunity. I totally should have just talked about Space Seed today. Oh, well. Exoteric says both. Created because of massive eugenics program that got the whole world pissed at them. Yeah, I know you meant Adam Sung. Nadia says, OMG, Khan is Canadian? Whatever, he doesn't count. That's hilarious. PS2 Chipper says, no, that's what holograms are for. Oh my goodness. Crazy Normie YT says, missed the live chat lately. This episode was fascinating. Exoteric. What did I say? Were my ethics oozing out in my comments? I love that. PS2 Chipper, the internet has ruined me. Hasn't it ruined us all? Crazy Normie YT says, I was raised in a strange experiment called California. Hey, I like California. Oh, PS2 Chipper says, not in the membership. I can solve that. PS2 Chipper has just gifted 5 memberships. So if you join the membership from these gifts that PS2 Chipper has given, you can do : and you could have the cute little emoji too. But you don't have to, like, no pressure. But since there's 5 free ones, snap them up while you can, you know, like, why not? Exoteric says, observant, curious, skeptical should be the goal of every parent. Otherwise, you end up with old, weird, tinsy people like me, or much worse. You know what's so interesting? We saw Khan in Strange New Worlds. Did we? You know what? I haven't seen Strange New Worlds. I've only seen 2 episodes. So I didn't know that. Well, I need to watch it before season 3 comes out. Yeah. So Exoteric, the whole thing about, oh gosh, what did you just remind me of? I don't know. I don't know what you reminded me of, but I'm sure I have it in my notes later on. There was something you just like hit on that I want to talk about, but I don't remember what it was. AF Kaplan, so great having you here. Wingrace says, not a missed opportunity. Nobody talks about this episode, so you're cornering the market. I guess so. That's a nice way to think about it. PS2 Chipper says, no, you have to do the Borg. Okay, so the next keystone moment. Man, I'm going to, Exoteric, if that comes back to me, I'm going to let you know what it was that you like struck a chord about. Okay, the next keystone that I noticed in this episode was about leadership for the quote unquote greater good. And again, this kind of comes back to what is the greater good and who decides what the greater good is. So in this episode at the end, 22 of the colonists are like, you know what? We're good. We want to leave. We don't want to do this colony thing anymore. We want to leave on the Enterprise. And I don't remember their argument. I don't remember what it was. And I'm not going to rewatch the episode to find out because I just kind of skimmed it before this conversation. But I don't remember why, but they wanted to leave. And Aaron, the leader, was like, just give me 6 months. Just give me 6 months to just kind of get things in place, and then you can leave. And the Enterprise has agreed to come back in 6 months to pick you up if you've changed your mind. And she goes like, why? So you can pressure us for the next 6 months to try to convince us to stay? Because that's all that's going to happen. Nothing else is going to change. And Picard's like, you guys have only tasted the littlest bit of Federation life. You don't really know what you're asking. And if you leave, it's going to cause a lot of damage to your society. So why don't you just give us some time, like a cooling off period, to really think things through? We will pick you up. I promise. We will come back for you. And Hannah's just like, what is that going to do? We've made our decision. We already know what we want. We want to leave. And Aaron is like, okay, you want to leave? I have to let you go. And Martin, of course, is like, no, you can't. The society will be destroyed. This is not what the founders wanted. The founders wanted everyone to stay and play their roles, which, again, might I point out, if they had more redundancy in their society, this might not have hit them so hard, right? Because they could have just like had their second person in command take over. However, I get the feeling their colony was kind of small, like say a couple hundred people, although I don't remember if they said a number. But if their colony was kind of small, like a couple hundred people, and then they lose 22 of them, that is a big hit to the society. I can get that. But now they want to go. And now here's the thing about leadership, because Aaron was like, what do I do that's best for the people? Because what's best for the society as a whole is for these 22 people to stay here. Otherwise, we're going to have huge gaps in our society, and it's not going to function harmoniously. However, if you keep them when they don't want to stay, now they're prisoners. And now they're not going to function harmoniously in society either, because now they're here against their will. And now instead of being happy-go-lucky, I was built to be a gardener, now they're going to be like, I hate plants. I'm going to kill all the plants. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe they wouldn't do anything like mean against the society, but they're just not going to be happy. And that's what Aaron's kind of role is to make sure everybody is living in harmony with one another, and they wouldn't be living in harmony. So my question for you in the comments is, do you think Aaron did the right thing? Was there another choice he could have made? Do you think he made the right thing in letting those colonists go? And so that's question 1. Do you think he did the right thing? The second thing, do you think the colony totally collapsed after this because they were missing these key components and they just couldn't recover and they couldn't adapt? And then the third question is, do you think another Starfleet captain would have handled this whole situation differently? Those are my 3 questions. So the first is did Aaron do the right thing? The second is, did the colony completely collapse because of this decision? And the third one is, do you think another Starfleet captain would have done this differently? So I'm going to check the chat. Let me know your thoughts in the chat if you have thoughts. And then we'll hit the last pillar, or the last kind of thing that I noticed in this episode. Yes, phase that like button if you haven't already. Crazy Normie YT says, don't worry, I actually love California. Well, you don't have to love it. I happen to love it. It's not perfect, but it's where I currently live. Use your Borg colon to assimilate the like button. Yeah, you made it sound kind of gross. Best of Trek, worst of Trek. Nadia says, what is the greater good and who decides what that is? What an apropos question right now. Tariffs much? Yeah, and it's true. It's the person who's in charge, or the people who are in charge, who usually decide. And I feel like in the colonists' case, whoever flew the people, like same thing with Khan, right? Like whoever decided back then, like this is what's done. It's done now. We live on this little bubble. This is what we're doing. But now, when there's this transition point, and Aaron has to decide, do they stay, or do we keep them or not? Like now it's kind of all on him. There is no group think around it. There's no collection of people who are all on the same page. It's like Martin is like, they can't go. They're like, you better let me leave. And Aaron's in the middle of it. So who decides what's the best? In this case, it was just down to one person, which is always a dangerous place to be in. But happens all the time, right? Happens in families, relationships, what have you, where it's up to one person. Exoteric says, it's curious how the people with the power to determine for the greater good never seem to choose education, so everyone can reason their own greater good. It's a good point. Randall Wong says, we never saw what happened if they returned, did we? Of course not, because we don't get where are they nows in Star Trek The Next Generation. We get a one and done. We saw them. We left them. We hope the best happened. And except for that planet where Worf's half-brother was, where they saved like one little colony of people in the holodeck, where he did that secretly. And then they let the entire planet die. That's the only time when we don't get a where are they now, because we see like what happened to that planet, but we don't see what happened to the colony. Like that could be interesting. Go back to, I feel like, again, if Lower Decks would have lasted longer, I'm sure they would have covered that as well. Because I feel like they just like tied up all the loose ends. Hold on a second. I missed something. I missed something important. Where did it go? Yes, DJ Magix, welcome to the away team. And if I missed any others, PS2 Chipper, let me know in the chat. Crazy Normie YT says, I would like to know if the colony survived. Nadia says, things that make you go, eh? And Exoteric says, indeed. Exoteric says, yes, yes, and yes. Yes, Aaron did the right thing. Yes, the colony was able to survive. And I forget what my third question was. Oh, my third question was, how would another Starfleet captain handle this? And yes, I guess means that they would all handle it exactly the same. Nadia says, but you're touching upon an even more important point, critical thinking. Teaching people how to really think about what they are told and giving them tools to research and discuss and decide, which is such a good point. This is the whole, if you guys have ever heard of Common Core, which is a way that you have if you have children in America, you have. But it's a way of teaching children that is more deductive reasoning than like rote memorization. And it came about because originally in America, schools were made to help students be better factory workers. So this is back in the day when like there was the Industrial Revolution. There was a whole boom of factories literally everywhere. And the question was, how do we get people to be better factory workers, to be healthier, to be like more efficient, to know how to like sit in one spot and do a repetitive task all day long without getting tired. And so schools were made. And if you look at the way classrooms were set up, it was like a factory floor. It was like, they literally call it assembly. When everybody gets together, like they literally call it an assembly. People have to stand in lines, like just like an assembly line. Like it was created to support the society that was coming into existence, to make it more powerful and effective and smooth. That day is long past, right? Now we're in the information age, and the industrial age is long gone. Factories are shutting down or moving overseas. Everything is getting more into technology. And so the ability to sit down and face forward and take direction is no longer valued in the society we're building. Now what's going to make us stand apart and be super successful is that critical thinking. So Common Core was introduced to teach our new generation of kids how to do deductive reasoning. We are living in that transition period between, like, the parents never grew up with this, the kids are growing up with this, and so there's a lot of friction. Not only the parents, the teachers also never grew up with this. So there's a lot of friction between, like, you know, we were taught these formulas and this is exactly how you solve this problem, and now kids are being taught how to figure out how to solve a problem, which is a totally different way of thinking, and in some ways a lot harder. And you know what's interesting, because you know I've taught many different ages of students over the years. The kids who do really well with, like, the traditional rote memorization struggle a lot with the Common Core, with, like, the deductive reasoning. The kids who don't do super well with that rigid, structured, formulaic style usually do very well with deductive reasoning, because they don't have to memorize anything. They can just figure things out. And the people who do really well in the structured sense can eventually figure out the Common Core as well. So really it helps everyone. But man, being in this transition period is, like, really rough. In, like, 20 years or whatever, when the people coming up have all gone through this, it won't be such a big swing. But yeah, it's rough. But to your point, Nadia, yes, it's like teaching people how to think about thinking, how to think about decision making is such a powerful and priceless skill. And it is a skill. It's not something you're just born with. It's something that you have to be taught and trained in. And it's really, and, like, you still may come to different conclusions from everyone around you. That's totally fine. But you know why you thought that, right? Like, you have reasons. You weren't just like, oh, I was just told this, so whatever. You know, like, you actually know why you believe what you believe. DJ Magic says, Guy needed to realize if he kept them, eventually they would figure out a way to get, of how to get out themselves, now that they know that there's more out there. Yeah, they would not have been happy, and they probably would have left. Mr. Captain 93 says Cisco would have been a unique response for sure. I kind of feel like all the captains would have had a very unique response to this, because I'm seeing Captain Kirk coming in and being like, we're just gonna, like, do it. You know what I mean? Like, we don't need to ask permission. We're just gonna do it. And of course, Captain Picard is gonna be super diplomatic. I feel like Janeway also would have been like, we're just gonna do it. I don't know if Janeway would have taken the colonists away. She might have been like, no, y'all need to stay, and we're on our way somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, if you come with us, you're going with us all the way back to Earth. You know what I mean? I do feel like each captain would have had a really unique response in this situation. Best of Trek, worst of Trek says, Aaron did the right thing. I think they're smart enough to adapt. It'll just take time. Yeah, and I think also I agree with you. And I also think that will make them a stronger society in the end, because everyone who stayed chose to stay. You know what I mean? Everyone who stayed wants to stay. They want to be a part of this society. They want to make this work. And those are the people you actually want to be there, right? Because they're going to do what it takes. Maybe they're going to cross-train. They're going to learn some new skills that they weren't selectively bred for, but that they can learn, so that way their society works better. So I also think that they survived. Nadia. Poor Florida. I feel like Florida, oh, that was you also, Nadia. I was like, didn't Florida catch some crap last week? But that was also you, Nadia. Nadia says, could be worse. Could be Florida, because she's a ex-Floridian. Crazy Norby says Florida gets hurricanes, which is too crazy for me. Agreed. Although California gets earthquakes, which is also not super fun. Best of Trek, worst of Trek says, I think most captains would still do this the same way, which is an interesting thought. I think they all would have probably granted asylum. I can't imagine any of them saying straight up no. But I do think the experience of this whole thing would have been pretty different depending on the captain. Crazy Normie YT says, Aaron killed the colony's experiment, but may have saved the colony. Ooh, I like that. Nadia agrees with that. I like that, because Picard was saying, I think we've destroyed the whole colony, you know, by even helping. Which I'm like, yeah, help me. I would rather you help me than let us be destroyed, but we kept our morals intact up until the last second. Like, no, help us. Help us. Take some colonists, but at least we get to keep going, you know? Exoteric says, preach, Nadia. An uninformed populace is dangerous to the greedy. No wonder education takes a cut, no matter what corporate-owned politician is in charge. Yeah, education is so important. But to your point, Nadia, which I really love, and Exoteric, is that it's like not just education of, like, let me learn the facts, but it's education of, like, how to educate yourself, how to think about thinking, how to think about learning. I love that. I love that. Hello, Justin. Welcome to the away team. Thank you, PS2 Chipper, who has allowed a whole bunch of people to join the away team today. Best of Trek, Worst of Trek says, Troy, though, just had a mind assault by Jeb in the previous episode. But now she's getting into her most real relationship in TNG. That's not Riker. Yeah, Troy has just been through it, okay? Like, Troy gets mind assaulted every time we see Troy, it seems like. Even in Nemesis, she got assaulted again. I was so irritated. I mean, granted, I was irritated by a lot of stuff in that movie. But I was like, seriously, we're still doing this? We're in the movies and we're still doing this. Like, Troy's still getting assaulted. But yes, we know that in TNG, no matter what crazy thing happens, they'll all be okay by the next episode. Like they've all totally handled it and processed it and they're good. Trauma's not really a thing. And I agree with you, Best of Trek, Worst of Trek. I actually think this is the best person for her, hands down. They have a healthy, loving, committed relationship where they're both equals. They both like each other the same. And unfortunately, he lives in a biodome he can't leave and that she cannot come to. So that's kind of sad. And he does say, he is like, you know, he's like, with all the genetically perfect, compatible women on this planet, I had to fall in love with you. Like, probably because you're so exotic and different or whatever. Who could blame him, though? Nadia says Janeway would have just activated the colony's self-destruct protocol. The good old Janeway Alpha Pi. She would have been like, everybody, come on board. You're all being evacuated right now. PS2 Chipper says, I am not fond of Common Core. Yeah, like, most people are not fond of Common Core. Critical thinking is so important. I totally agree. Transition time to training. Okay. Your comparison of rote learning versus Common Core is exactly why Chinese students can really struggle when coming to the university in the US and often need some time transitioning. Yeah, it's such a different way of thinking. Like, memorizing things, that is a skill too. Being able to memorize things is a skill. I am still wowed by actors who memorize pages and pages of dialogue. They've memorized and they can not only say them verbatim, but with emotion that is appropriate to the words. Like, I do these 30-second skits and it sounds like I'm reading because I'm trying to remember my lines. And it's like one sentence. So I'm like, how do they do that? So there is a place for memorization. I want to throw that under the bus. But yeah, our whole learning system can be more than that. Exoteric says, I can't imagine Jellicoe doing it the same way, or the many terrible captains we've seen over the years. Remember, we got shows about the best of Starfleet, not the average. That would be a lame show. Nadia says, what about the Enterprise B captain in Generations? Cameron from Ferris Bueller. DJ Magic says, TNG was a sci-fi Scooby-Doo gang. That's pretty funny. Justin Dot says, I like Devanani Rawl one. That guy is one to reach at the bar. Yeah, Devanani Rawl is the worst. Like, that guy is such a creep. That was one of my least favorite. Well, actually, most of them are my least favorite Troy romances. There's like not very many that I think are just like good and not assaulty. Exoteric says, for real, I didn't learn how to learn until I was in my 30s when I was convinced to try college. Ooh, what a gift, having one eyes open to their own ignorance. That's a beautiful way to put it. Best of Trek, Worst of Trek says, Harrington would have only taken the colonists if it were a Tuesday. Yes, okay. Justin Dot says, I also like the rivalry with Riker and Devanani Rawl. I do like when Riker gets rawled up about Troy, but then I quickly get irritated because you could be with Troy at any time and you choose not to. So, like, pick a lane, Riker, figure it out. To watch at the bar. Yeah, but because he's hiding his Betazoid, like, ancestry so he can mind read people and trick them. Okay, really? Was this? Oh my gosh, I don't remember that. The guy who played Devanani Rawl was also on Seinfeld. I did not know that. And apparently he gives super oily foot massages. No thanks, which is pretty hilarious. Oh, now I'm trying to remember the Seinfeld episode. Okay. Last thing on the list was the price of perfection. So what is the full price of perfection? Let me take this one down. In this case, the perfection that they have created is a society that's full of harmony. Everyone's working together. People know their purpose, which again is super attractive to me because I feel like my whole entire life, I've always been looking for, how can I really contribute to the world? What can I give that's just me? That's like important, that's meaningful. How can I leave my mark on the world? I've been asking myself that since I was tiny, since I was like, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7. I've always wanted to just do something amazing in the world. And I'm really attracted to this idea of, it's just, when you're born, it's just like you have your purpose. Your purpose is literally given to you at birth. This is your purpose. And you're like, oh, great. But it only is attractive to me because I've done the inner work of trying to figure out my purpose in life, and then realizing there is no one purpose. There's many, many purposes. There's lots of things you can do. Being impactful is so much more than like a career or a relationship or a person. Like there's so many things I learned through that process. And it's kind of to the point of Data never wanting the shortcut to becoming human, not letting Q make him human, because it's not about becoming human. It's not about being human, I should say. It's about the journey and process of becoming human and what he learns and how he grows and how he changes. It's kind of like that. I've grown and changed so much in pursuit of this mysterious purpose. However, if it were handed to me, I would not have that growth because I would not have that pursuit. So it's kind of like a double-sided sword, right? Because on the one hand, I'm like, oh, it sounds so nice to just have your purpose handed to you. But on the other hand, if I never had a journey, I would never know the difference, right? I wouldn't know what I was missing. I wouldn't have that issue. I wouldn't have that struggle, and I wouldn't have that growth. So the price of perfection is, yes, they have their perfect society by whatever their definitions are, and everyone's happy-go-lucky until the Enterprise comes and messes it all up. But at the same time, they're also isolated, right? There is no bigger purpose other than what's going on in their little bubble, which I feel like diminishes them, in my opinion, because what could they be contributing to the outside galaxy? What could the galaxy be contributing to them that they're missing out on because they don't want to mix with the others? I don't know. And maybe that's just a total personal thing and it's totally irrelevant in the scheme of things. Also, potential stagnation, right? Because like we mentioned before with Geordi's visor, giving him the ability to see things that the normal human eyes couldn't possibly see, there was innovation created from Geordi's disability, from him not being able to see with his regular eyes. He was given the ability to see things no one else can ever see, like no one else has ever seen. And so and then we see in Lower Decks, there are other crew members who have the cool visor, which I love. I love that they kept that going. Like, oh yeah, more than one person has a visor. I just love that. It's so cool. So there is that kind of con from, not con with a K, but con, C-O-N, from this particular Masterpiece Society, is that there's potential stagnation. Maybe there's a limit to their innovation because they're so isolated and because they don't deal with some of the things that cause innovation, which is usually strife and struggle. Usually pain and problems create innovation. We're like, we have to solve this. It's not always just inspiration. Like, oh, wouldn't it be so cool if we did this? That also works. And inspiration definitely is a motivation. But like Tony Robbins says, people do things for one of two reasons: inspiration or desperation. And like 9 times out of 10, it's desperation that gets people to take action, right? Because staying in pain is so uncomfortable. And reaching for the stars is like, it's great, but if it doesn't happen, there's also like no downside really that you immediately feel. So that's a potential pain. Also kind of like a potential limitation in their ideation and a limitation in their exploration. They don't have to be. They can still explore. They can explore without mixing with the others, just like the Generation ship in Voyager we mentioned. They could take their little shuttle, if they had a little shuttle, and just like go bop around and see what's around their planet or other planets if they wanted to. But that's just not what they're into. So are they missing out when it's not even something they're interested in? I don't know. So my last question then is, if you were on this colony, if you grew up in this colony, you were Aaron's friends or whatever, would you stay or would you go? Let me know in the comments below. I'm going to read the comments and that's going to be it. So now if you have something to say, now's the time to say it. Okay. Would you stay or would you go? Yeah, so PS2 Chipper says, I didn't do well in college until I got on Ritalin. Yes. And then that's the other thing too, is like Ritalin again is an innovation. It's an innovation that supports people that would not have existed. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. Mr. Captain 93 says Lower Decks should have revisited this planet. I think they would have. They would have eventually. Like, they would have revisited everything. Justin says, I didn't remember the foot massage. Honestly, Justin, I didn't either until Nadia said it. And I was like, oh, yeah. You know what I remembered from Devanani Raw? I remember that really creepy, like, scalp massage that he does with Deanna, where she's like, no, I don't want this. I want you to leave my quarters. And then he, like, rubs her hair and pulls off her headband. And he's like, do you? Or do you really want me to stay? And that's when I was like, I'm over this dude. This dude is just creepy AF. And he needs to get the heck out of here. But I don't know. Deanna was all about that life. Um, Exoteric said, I made it halfway through an engineering degree twice, still no degree. Life can be hard. Yeah, engineering is super hard. So good on you for even trying it. Best of Trek, worst of Trek says, I have a degree in audio engineering and I still have no idea what my purpose is. Yeah, interesting because audio engineering and purposes, or like degrees and purposes, have nothing to do with each other necessarily, right? Like they're not necessarily connected. Justin says, that's neat. I agree. That's super neat. Yeah, I have multiple degrees in microbiology, and I am talking about Star Trek because that's what I love to talk about. Soon I'm going to be talking about sci-fi and micro, which I am so excited to bring you guys. It's going to be these deep dives into like basically like the science of science fiction. So I'm going to be looking at all these different sci-fi movies and shows and talking about the realism or lack thereof of the microbiology science behind them, which is going to be super fun. But in general, I'll really talk about microbiology in my everyday life. I did a lot during the pandemic, but not because I wanted to, because I was forced to. Exoteric says, acoustics makes me happy. I love that. Mr. Captain 93 says, that degree serves a purpose for the Federation News Service. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Nadia says, I would go. I would check things out and I'd probably eventually come back. That is interesting. I didn't even think about that, Nadia. That option of like, I'm just going to go explore because they did say they'd be back in 6 months, right? So you could potentially be one of those colonists who's like, well, I'm just going to take a vacation for 6 months. I'm just going to see what's out there, but I'll be back in 6 months and then I'll really think about like what I want to do with my life. Or maybe I won't come back in 6 months because I don't have to. But that's something I didn't even think about of just trying it, not necessarily leaving everything you've ever known forever at this moment. Do you remember that episode? Oh my gosh, it's called First Contact. The TNG episode First Contact, when they're trying to make first contact with this society that is on the cusp of warp travel. But everybody's got this like alien phobia, and then Riker's discovered and everyone freaks out. And so the second in command tries to like murder himself, but frame Riker so that people will know that aliens are real, whatever. And then the president of the world is like, you know what? Because he's talking to Picard and he's just like, yes, first contact would be amazing, but my people are not ready for it. They're just not ready. So we can't do this because it's going to cause complete chaos in our society. And they're like, okay, fine. But then the head scientist lady, whose name I totally forgot, she's like, take me with you. I can't live with these people, these barbarians. You know, she's like, I cannot live with their ignorance anymore. And they're like, fine. They granted her asylum. She came on board the Enterprise and we never got, where is she now? She just like went off into the sunset. But like, I remember thinking about that and understanding her frustration and being like, I can't live with these people who like deny aliens exist and all of this and think they're evil and all this. Like, I can't live in a society like that. At the same time, it is really hard for me to imagine leaving everything you've ever known and going off onto the Enterprise. There's Bolians, there's Klingons, there's Romulans out there. There's all kinds of people you've never even heard of, cultures you've never heard of. To me, it feels like it'd be too scary, like too big of a move. And then she can never go back. I mean, she could go back. Like, I'm sure they can make up a cover story that she was lost in the woods or whatever. She could go back, but like, she probably would never want to go back. For this group, at least there's more than one of them, you know, but they're like leaving isolation. And I wonder, how is that? And I also think the same thing for the colony on Kittimer that Worf found of like the kids of the Romulans and Klingons that survived the battle of Kittimer. And like when all the kids left and they were like, oh, we're going to go explore the galaxy. I also thought like, that's a terrible plan because they're all super naive. They don't know anything about anything. And they're half Romulan. These Klingons have pointy ears. Like, that is not going to go well with people. But anyways, we don't get to where are they now, so shall never know. Exoteric says, purpose is what we make it. Be curious and find inspiration. Bring something new into the world. Boom. Mic drop moment. Best of Trek, worst of Trek says, would not have stayed in Ron Canada's world. Yeah. I don't know. Windgrace says, I'd go, but I'm biased because I've dreamt of being beamed aboard the D since I was born. Oh, that's really sweet. Sleep apnea. Oh, are these the things, sleep apnea and autism, are these the things you would change if you were, oh, Ritalin wakes you up? Does it? Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting. You're saying, oh, that's how with sleep apnea and autism, Ritalin like counteracts some of the effects of that. I didn't know that. I did not know Ritalin did anything for sleep apnea. I thought it was only like that machine thing, but maybe I'm thinking of some other thing, something I saw on like an infomercial. I don't know. That's interesting though. That's good to know. Nadia says, that's a great point. My son has ADHD, ASD, and DLD. Before we had medication for him, as brilliant as he was, he had a terrible time in school, and the meds make a huge difference. Yes, and the meds make a huge difference because the school system that your child is in, like, you have to be a certain way. Like, you have to, sit still, pay attention, all these things, so that you can catch what the teachers are saying, right? Like, because that's the model. If it was different, let's say, because back before schooling was institutionalized and it was more like apprenticeships, maybe that would be different, because a lot of people who have ADHD, even though some things they can't focus on, some things they hyper focus on, which Nadia, you probably know better than me. I've worked with a lot of students who have different levels of neurodivergence. And a lot of my students had ADHD. And like, even though, maybe math or English or, whatever, some subject, they might be like not able to totally like track and follow along. But at the same time, there'd be other things that you're just like, this kid is brilliant. You know what I mean? You're just like, how did they, like, I had one kid, he could build literally anything. He could build anything. I mean, reading was really difficult for him. It was so hard, but building, like, and I would always tell this kid, I was like, if I was stranded on a desert island, I want this kid with me. He's going to build shelter. He's going to build a freaking ship that will be seaworthy, that will get us out of there. Like, he can just, and he can see it in his mind. And the thing is, his type of brilliance, he couldn't really explain what he was building or how, but you can give him a task. You can say, hey, can you build such and such? And he would just go, yeah, I got it. And you'd be like, what are you going to do? And he'd be like, I just got it. Like, he can't even explain it because he sees all the moving parts in his head, right? And I have a lot of, and I have friends too who have, ADHD or ADD, and they have, again, like, I see them hyper fixate on things, and then they do those things like to perfection, to a level of skill that's amazing. So anyways, all that to say is, like, medication is such a game changer and such a gift. Also, like, just modern medicine, right? Like, how many women did not survive childbirth back in the day just for simple reasons that are totally mitigated now with medication. It's such a blessing. And it was caused, like, it was an innovation that had to happen. It was forced to happen. And they wouldn't have to worry about any of this on this colony, right? Because they can just genetically delete it or whatever. God bless pharmaceutical researchers. My son's quality of life is 3,000% better. Oh, I love that. I love that your son is doing so much better and just like enjoying life. Ugh. It's such a, yeah. And I've had kids, like, I've had kids who like had some sort of medication and sometimes they would like forget to take it or whatever. And then those are like bad days. Those are like really bad days, right? Because all their levels are all over the place and they're all crazy and stuff. But it's bad days for everyone. It's not just for like me or like the other classmates, but also for them, because like they want to pay attention or they want to be a part of the project or they want to go on the field. You know what I mean? Like, they want to be a part of things. And this is like inhibiting their ability to join sometimes. DJ Magic says, I'd be out just like now if aliens popped up at the front door and offered, I'm out. I love the aspect of the new and unknown. That's a rad question too. Like, if aliens came right now, would you leave with them? I wouldn't. Because you remember that, what was that show? Was that the Twilight Zone where the aliens came to eat the people? I feel like somehow I'd be on that ship. The ship of the aliens who are just trying to eat the people. So I would wait. I would not be an early adopter to that particular thing. I'd wait for those people to circle back around and come back and tell me about their experiences and make sure they're not like pod people or something. And then maybe I'd consider it, but I wouldn't be in the first wave of people trying to leave the planet, probably. PS2 Chipper says, read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which is a classic. Nadia says, I have multiple degrees in international business, hence the constant mentions of international education and trade policy. That makes so much sense. I actually did not know that. You're also a professor, right? Are you a professor of it in international studies or something? I had no idea. Exoteric says, yes, feed me science. Randall Wong says, porpoises in life are in cetacean ops in the Enterprise D. Cetacean ops. Those porpoises in lower decks just like had me dying. Like, the way they were always hitting on everybody, I just thought was so funny. Nadia says, I would definitely go for a bit. I have been to approximately 30 countries, but I still end up back in Canada. 30 countries is wild. I'm so impressed by you. Best of Trek, Worst of Trek says, I can't wait to see you branch out into other topics. So funny you should mention that. I have a list of like 15 topics, but then I was like, I don't know. I was just really nervous. I wasn't sure how you guys were gonna perceive this particular style of Trek review. So at first I was like, this is genius. And then I was like, this is a terrible idea. So I don't know, but I'm glad to hear that. Masterpiece Rumspringa. I don't know what that is or means or how to say that. DJ Magix. To be honest, alien first contacts would throw the world into shambles just based on the religious aspects that there's life outside of what has been taught. Yeah, yeah, like I, okay, so there's like all of our all of our movies and shows and stuff like that since back in the day, whenever aliens come, it's always bad, right? It's like Independence Day. They're always coming to kill us or eat us or something. I guess ET was kind of nice, but for the most part, aliens equal bad, disaster, scary. But in First Contact, when the Vulcans show up, those those humans are just like, hey, you want to have a drink? Let's dance. I mean, they were in awe, they were amazed, they were surprised, but they weren't afraid. And I wonder if maybe because the aliens looked a lot like humans with pointy ears. I don't know. But I agree with you. I think humans in general would freak out a lot more than they freaked out. Okay, PS2 Chipper says I use a CPAP. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking of like the CPAP, but then I was like, maybe I just made that up. I don't know. Oh, okay. I see. Okay. Thank you for that, PS2 Chipper. I did not know that. Yes, the CPAP is another great invention, says Nadia. Ritalin is a central nervous stimulant, which can increase alertness and reduce the excessive sleepiness. I only knew it about like increasing alertness and focus. I did not know anything about excessive sleepiness. That's totally new. DJ Magic, totally new to my knowledge, which is wonderful. I love learning new things. DJ Magic says, or I feel it would be a very, very reminiscent of the Native Americans' first contact with Europeans. It didn't end well. Yeah, again, in that case, they were still humanoid. So that would be more like this, where like they're all human, except for in this, they used to be part of the same group and then they left on purpose, and then it's like the group followed them. So I don't know. I feel like the like dynamics of that would be pretty different. PS2 Chipper says, for me, it's just not giving up. Which I love that. I love that you're not giving up. And then you say, I was told it is the OCD aspect of autism where I have a very difficult time to give up on a puzzle. Oh, see, and that's like when you're applying that puzzle, PS2 Chipper, to your own life and bettering your experience on this planet, that is a good thing to not give up on and to really focus on. That's like such the perfect use of that superpower of focus. So I love that. Exoteric says, as potentially the only native in the room, yeah, it was not effing great. Oh, what? I did not know you were indigenous, Exoteric. I love that. I had a friend who, so like, I'm part indigenous, but I was never taught anything about that culture. I'm part Cherokee. It's never taught anything about that culture other than what you hear in other than what you learn in like history books, which is something, but like, is it accurate? I don't know. Is it meaningful to my identity? Of course not. And I kind of feel like I missed out on a little bit of that, like not being passed down to me. And I also think about that with this whole scenario of like cultural preservation versus contamination, because my great grandmother was Cherokee and then married my great grandfather, and of course they had passed long before I was born, but even like her stories weren't shared. Because you know how families do that, they're like, oh, let me tell you about grandma, or let me tell you about your uncle, or let me tell you about this time. It was like nothing was shared, and I feel like that's where I've kind of missed something as just in my own story. But I also think about in Data's day when Keiko and O'Brien get married. Keiko has this like, you know, beautiful like Japanese gown that she gets married in, and O'Brien's just wearing like I call them the dress robes because I love Harry Potter, but he's wearing like the gowny type uniform thing. And I remember watching that episode and being like, I love the fact that even in the 24th century, Keiko's culture has been preserved. Like, she's not getting married in like future garb. She's getting married in like traditional Japanese garment. I just love that. It just like gave me so much hope that like the things that are special about our cultures don't have to be lost just because we're getting more like intermingled. I just love that idea. And I did think about that with this episode, because I'm like, if the Enterprise comes, like, will it really contaminate their culture, or are they strong enough to like maintain their culture? Which I don't know. Yeah, How to Serve Man. It's a cookbook. Exactly. They're not trying to help us. It's a cookbook. Nadia says, nope, not a professor, but I worked with international students for a long time in the US and I do academic advising now. Okay, in a university. I knew you worked at a university. I thought you were a professor. So cool. Okay, DJ Magic says, even if they were eating people, they'd probably pass on eating me and then I could spy for the return trip. PS2 Chipper says, internet is glitching. The packets are not fitting the frames or some other techno babble. Yeah. Yep. So it's what Nadia said, PS2 Chipper. Blame it on the chronotons. Always blame it on the chronotons. Rumspringa is a rite of passage. So I'm not saying it right then. I need to Google this word. It's a rite of passage for Amish youth, typically between the ages of 16 and 21, during which they are allowed to experience the outside world before deciding whether to join the church. Get out of town. I didn't know that. I didn't know they had a choice. Oh, that's so interesting. I wonder what percentage of people choose to stay in the outside world, because you would have to be so like, I don't know what you would have to be, but I know for the Amish culture, it's very like isolated. So for you to be like, I'm out of here. I mean, can you come back? Can you ever like see your family again? Or do you have to really be like, we're cutting ties. I'm no longer a part of this community and I can never come back? Because I feel like that would be a lot of pressure to be like, well, I can't leave. Because then you leave forever. You know what I mean? Oh, that's interesting. Exoteric says, I couldn't do a YouTube channel. No matter what I started thinking about it, I would circle back to the Fermi paradox and the great filter and how humans are doomed. You could totally do it. Let me tell you, Exoteric, if you did a YouTube channel about how humans are doomed, you would have such a huge audience. They would be a bunch of people who are kind of bummers, but you'd have such a huge audience coming to just like soak up what you have to say and to just be like, right on, I totally agree with you. So I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. DJ Magic says, me leaving is contingent on them being nice and not trying to eat people. That's fair. PS2 Chipper says modafinil did little for me, which I'm guessing is another medication I haven't heard of before, and I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly. Nadia says, is anyone else afraid that when the aliens finally come here for reals, we will wipe each other out because of the pathogens that will be transferred? I mean, pathogens are going to pathogen. It's what they do, you know? That's why we create medicine. That's why we have to innovate. You know, like they're trying to live, we're trying to live. Randall Wog says, eating badly man may make you less attractive to cannibals. Are you talking about for the aliens? Oh, that's interesting. PS2 Chipper says there is a YouTube guy that talks about leaving. And I'm guessing you mean that leaving the Amish community. You can't come back home after leaving the Amish community. See, because it's just like these colonists. Like when they were like, oh, if we stay for 6 months, you're just going to try to like brainwash us or convince us to stay. You're going to pressure us to stay. Like if you get to explore the outside world, but if you decide to leave, you can never come back. Like never is a long time, you know? So I feel like I'd be pressured to stay. Even if I wanted to leave, I would feel some kind of like I wouldn't want to turn my back on everything I've ever known, which again is why I was talking about those other episodes. How do you wrap your head around I'm never going to see my people again? That's got to be tough. Exoteric says, LOL, fun idea. Literally every show ends up with we're doomed. It's a gift. You know how some YouTube channels have like a catchphrase? I follow this one lady on YouTube. She ends every single video by saying, follow your joy, which I think is so fun. And I just love her little catchphrase. But if your catchphrase was just like, we're all doomed, every video ended like that, I think that would be hilarious. Depressing, but freaking hilarious. Okay, that does it for me today. Thank you so much for everyone who came live. Thank you so much for everyone who's watching on the replay. And if you're still watching on the replay at this time, drop something in the comments just so that I can acknowledge the fact that you stuck with all of this through the replay, which is amazing. Join us next week where we'll do another deep dive into some kind of topic related to some Star Trek episode or episodes. Thank you so much for coming. I've loved having you here. And thank you, PS2 Chipper, for donating all those memberships. If you have not yet snapped up a membership, be sure to do so now and join the away team. Still figuring out what all that membership is going to look like with your help, but it's going to be amazing. So it was great having you here. When Grace says, join us next week where we're all doomed. Have a good one. Talk soon.